All right, okay, I think we're live. See if we got anyone on here. Let's see, now is my first time doing this, so I've got to get my head around this. Can you hear me okay? Stephen. Good stuff. How are you? I was thinking the other day there, but it's been on my mind to put a geodesic dome at the farm for a long time. I might get around to it one day. Hopes all's going well with you. If anyone has any questions there, fire them out, and I'll see if I can answer them best I can. Hope you all had a pretty chill Sunday. It's been pretty nice weather here, about windy, but it's been dry. But we had a lot of rain this last couple of days here. Was it Thursday in particular? In the middle of the day, we got a lot of rain because things were starting to dry out a bit. But I guess it's early in the year yet. We have a few more months to go before things start getting drier. Good man, Stephen. Catching up in the lunch break. Okay, I see John's message there. An overview. The enterprise we're currently running at the farm. Well, currently we're doing very little because we're still in winter mode. The only thing in the farm right now is layers and some goats. And the layers are obviously our standard egg production operation, one of our centerpiece enterprises. The goats was something I was working on. It's really homestead at the minute. I think we've got 9 goats there. It's very much homestead that we were kind of looking to develop, get our head around. We'll get my head around goats and what's involved with them, with the idea of potentially micro dairying. I was talking in one of the last videos. I'm probably going to put that on hold because one issue with milking goats is you got to be here every day, and just this coming season, I want a bit more freedom than that. So I've just put that on hold, but it's probably there in the longer, maybe term plans for the farm. And then as the summer kicks on, I'm running like last year we ran broilers, pigs, turkeys, layers. Then we had beef, a little bit of lamb, not that much lamb, and the goats as well. Whereas this year, I'm probably just going to do turkeys, layers. We'll do beef and lamb. Maybe the goats will either be there or they won't. I'll figure that out as I go on. Not going to do any broilers this year, just because it's with the price of grain and everything. It's just not worth all the work the broilers are for me in my context, and with the weather. So I'm not really going to push much on that this year, and I'm on the fence with the pigs yet. Purely for 2 reasons: one, the price of grain, and 2, the areas of the farm that I need worked over by pigs is starting to get smaller and smaller. So I wouldn't be bringing on pigs onto the farm and putting them in a place where they're going to be more disruptive than anything. So it's like everything, every animal has a job on the farm, and to fit into my context anyway. So we're trying to use them as much as possible to do the kind of job nature designed them to do. And for me, pigs, I've got maybe an acre and a half of woodland that could be maybe worked over another year. And then on the little farm that I rent up the road, there's a block up on the kind of northeastern side of that I could work over with pigs. It's full of wild gorse, or hun bushes as we'd call them. and it's actually very difficult to get in there to actually start to clear it out and kind of open out a wee bit, to help get the herbivores in. So my plan would be maybe to bring the pigs in there just to kind of beat some paths through it to make it a wee bit easier then to maybe thin out the growth, the wild gorse, and hopefully start to open it up into pasture land again. It's currently reverting into woodland as it would naturally do, succeeding back. So it is undergrazed, well, overstock and undergrazed. So the grasses kind of got grazed off it. So then stuff like alder, wild growth started taking over. And now, as the wild growths take over the cover and the brambles, and then alder will start to push through birch, spruce trees, as woodland would slowly succeed in. So my plan is maybe I'd like to revert that back. I'd like to, because it was naturally pasture land, or kind of upper pasture land. So I'd like to take that back and maybe push the trees back to the hedgerows. That's kind of my plan there. So yeah, pigs are maybe in, maybe out. I haven't fully committed to it yet, but our main enterprises are going to be layers and turkeys. And I have got some educational stuff at the farm, and I am also looking at uh, agritourism, but maybe more so I want to move away maybe from the agritourism just for my context, and maybe move towards education tourism, is what I would rather spend my time doing. So I'm playing about with that idea for the farm for this summer. See, we got any other questions? Hope that answers the kind of question. Hi, Cathal. Hi, Davy. Okay, so Davy's a question there about soil condition. Definitely, yes, I have noticed. Year on year, I can notice an improvement, a couple of folds. So if we start maybe with above the ground, and like a good example is the farm that I've rented up the road, which was severely overgrazed, mainly by horses. And so it was like the stand was it was nearly 90% rushes. If you look back in our videos, you'll see some images of it there. Like it was thick rush, soft rush, and and now I would love to get me layers up there. I can't get them in the gate. They can't get the eggmobile in the gate. I had the turkeys up there, but solely through planned grazing, we've started to revert that. Now I'm going up, I'll probably be moving up there to graze that in the next week, and it's at least 50% grasses now, 50% soft rush. And if I can devise a plan to get a way to get me layers up there, I know I can speed that up even faster. So it definitely, and I'm mainly talking about holistic plant grazing here, and letting grass plants express themselves in the way they've physically evolved to do that. And then, if I think even on the home farm here, we had a lot of moss and again overgrazing, moss taking over mainly on some of the more slopey ground, and the chickens have done a really good job at stirring that up. Any thatch grass, getting all that out and making way for new growth. And then in tandem with our planned grazing with the herbivores, we've started seeing a lot of real progression of the grasses and all types of grasses. I had actually an agricultural consultant on the farm here over the last summer, and he was so amazed even how there's like not native, but how there's like Italian ryegrass. The ground I'm on wouldn't have been typically, you know, um, plowed and sown completely with Italian rye, but Italian rye is operating. I've got it in my pastures in a mixed species sward, and it's performing very well, as well as other grasses. So, and then if we think what's happening under the ground, I suppose I don't believe in soil testing per se, because you're dealing with an incredibly complex system. So to try and label it in one way or another, I find too abstract, because you can be saying there's X amount of calcium in the soil, but is that calcium available or not available to plants? So it's kind of irrelevant to me. So I like to take a longer kind of approach to it and go by how the grasses perform and how the animals perform in the grasses, and look at it as a whole system. But when I came to the farm, I done a lot of tree planting, and I dig big holes for my fruit trees. Like I'm talking like nearly a meter by a meter square, and then maybe at least 2.5, 3 foot deep. And when I was digging in those holes, if I seen one worm in that whole hole when I got here, I was lucky. Then the next year, I was planting more trees, and probably every spadeful we took out, you might find one worm. Now this year, and this is just randomly sticking trees in throughout the pasture. This year, like you turn up the spade, you'll find multiple worms. But I actually done an experiment for I can't even remember. It was one of the national radio uh, broadcasters were doing a show, and the producer came out to the farm here. The presenter twice came out in spring, and we buried a cotton T-shirt about 4 inches. I just cut the sod, big sod, hinged it up, and we put in a cotton T-shirt, and then just hinged the sod back and tamped it back down. And then they were back here in the summertime, and we dug it up. And in fact, it took me so long to find it. I marked, there was a pear tree, and I says, right, it's 3 foot directly out from the pear tree. And I dug and I dug and I dug, could not find it. And I thought, what the hell happened here? I messed up the tree that I planted in. Eventually, I found the nylon tag where they literally, the whole t-shirt, in less than 3 months, the whole cotton t-shirt had been disintegrated, taken, gone. And all was left was a few areas where it was double seamed and the nylon tag. And if I hadn't found the nylon tag, I would have thought, oh, I buried it in the wrong place. I don't know where it is. So that's telling me that we're definitely moving in the right direction. But again, I kind of take the indicator of the grass above the ground. If if the grasses are starting to grow and express themselves, because I have a very messed up perception of what a grass plant should look like, because I'm used to seeing, we small grasses, when in reality, if we look back through history, healthy grass plants, they say some of the first people riding through the American plains could tie grass heads above their saddle, riding along on their horse, they could tie grass above their saddle. That's proper grass plants expressing themselves. And I can start to see my grasses now, in the summertime, they're growing up, 3-4 foot tall, expressing themselves. And it's not like they're stagnant, dried out grasses. They've got vibrant leaves on them. So I'm definitely seeing positives, and I put all that down to the holistic plan movement of the animals. Really, it's a big driver in what I think is the success of our farm, from what I can see anyway. Take another question. Hope that kind of gives you a kind of an idea. Thanks, Dermot. Hello there, Mr. Scania. Yeah, Davey just kind of confirming his kind of philosophy is the visible inspection, and yeah, generally, like I think everything works as a whole. If the animals that are on the grasses are healthy, it's a good sign the grasses are healthy, and it's a good sign the soil is healthy. And equally, if there seems to be a problem there, if there's sick animals, if there's sick looking grasses or plants, then that definitely would trigger me to start looking and investigating what might be the issues in that. Stephen, went to college with Stephen there. If college, I studied down in what was GMIT Letterfrack at the time. I think they've renamed it now. But I studied woodwork teaching. Stephen asked me there, is there any skills you took from college that you find useful now? You seem to be a pretty confident speaker and very, yeah. So that was one thing we learned. In fact, we learned at college was, how to communicate, and particularly because Stephen's from Donegal as well. I remember one of our lectures said, well, we'll have to beat that Donegal accent out of you. And I suppose even I traveled a bit around the world as well. And actually having gone to college, and because we have a very broad Donegal accent up here, and it's difficult to communicate to people from outside of Donegal. If you haven't gone through that process, becoming a teacher trains you to slow down and become a better communicator. And I found that even not only through just life in general, when I was traveling, being able to communicate to other people, it unlocks a lot more. And then also me running a business here, I need to be able to communicate to my customers. So having those skills that I learned in college. But I suppose our college degree was a very practical degree as well, in woodwork, technical drawing. So all those skills have stood to me well. But also we studied a lot of stuff in college that you wouldn't directly relate to farming, like psychology, sociology. but all these things are incredibly important, because one woman that we actually studied in college was Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin's an American lady who she has autism, and it puts her in a unique position because she is able to perceive the world through the eyes of how an animal would perceive the world. And she has written loads of books, done droves of work with the USDA, designing slaughter facilities throughout the US. And we studied her at college because of her ability to kind of explain to people what it's like to be autistic and how they perceive the world. And she was like a groundbreaking pioneer in her field. And actually, all these years later, she's someone that I highly look up to. And actually, her work influences a lot of what I do in the farm because, how do you create an environment that is happy and healthy for an animal? Well, you got to psychologically put yourself in their environment. Um, so that work from my college days has stood to me, and that's one thing I love about farming is that you really have to have a real bag of skills to get by because generally, like the type of farming I do, you're generally on your own, or maybe it's one or two people. It's not a big company with loads of people with loads of different skills. Um, so you gotta wear a lot of hats, and it makes the job more exciting for me. What else have we got? Hi there, based in northern France. Hey, thanks for tuning in. So a question there on the egg processing room and European standards. I actually uh, I don't qualify for European standards because European standards for an egg production unit is more than 350 birds. I don't keep more than 350 birds. So therefore, I'm not considered an egg producer per se as technically. Now that means that here in Ireland, I can't sell my eggs to a retailer like a shop or to food service like a restaurant. I can only sell them direct from the farm gate, which is fine. That works for me. So um, if to point you in the right direction, it is quite difficult. I've went down that road and I just found it too difficult. There is people I know of people that have done it. The best thing to do though is to look at some of the bigger mobile houses that are commercially produced. There's some of them available in Europe. Um, I wouldn't necessarily look at the chicken caravan from Australia because it doesn't really meet EU standards. Um, your biggest issue is the EU legislation has not been developed for mobile housing, it's been developed for fixed housing. So all regulations are set up for fixed housing, and it makes it difficult. But there is a few companies in Europe that have developed a mobile system. But the general problem is these units are incredibly big units. They're typically maybe 8 to 10 meters long, which makes them quite big and bulky. And you can still only maybe keep 400 birds in them because of the square meterage if the birds are housed. And it was because that kind of reason that I didn't really want to push my egg enterprise beyond the 350 limit that the EU legislation sets out as being. If you go above that, you'd be considered an egg producer. If you're below that, you're considered a hobby scale. Um, so I hope that answers that. The best thing would be to reach out people in your area. I know the Gone Girls are in France. What part I can't remember, but they have a pasture layer operation, so it might be worth checking out with them. You can check their Facebook page. They've definitely got some Ridgedale style egg mobiles in the go. Mr. Scania asked me, am I in any organic schemes? I'm not in any schemes. That's solely, and like everything I do is based on my context here. I don't, I'm not doing any of this for to be replicated with everything. Every decision I make is about me, and the reason why I'm not in any organic schemes is because I don't believe in subsidies. Because it's really like subsidies, I think, they're like a drug. You get addicted to them, and then you can't do without them. And the problem with subsidies is it's not money for nothing. This money comes with catches, and for me, my whole business model is built on a method of trust. I tell my customers how I'm going to produce the food, and then they can decide if they agree with that and they can support me, or if they don't agree with it, they can say, I'm not going to buy from him because I don't believe in that. But at the end of the day, I make the decision and I tell the customer, and then they make the decision. Um, if I start taking money from a scheme, all of a sudden someone else is coming in telling me what I can and can't do. And so therefore then I see that's kind of a cop out. The trust is kind of broken because I can tell the customer, oh well, I can't do that now because they told me I can't do it. And it breaks that trust for me. So I want to have I kind of prioritize that trust more. So I don't take any money from schemes. The other thing is, as I said before, I believe like subsidies are kind of like an addiction. And what happens if I'm taking money for subsidies and taking money for subsidies and then they stop? I'll have built my business plan to kind of expect that money to come, and all of a sudden it's not coming, and that could send me up the river. So with me deciding I'm not going to take it, I'm going to go and find another way of making that money myself. It gives me a bit more control, and I suppose inevitably it's down to the fact that I want to have control over making decisions on my farm and how I farm it. Let it be right or wrong, I might make bad decisions or whatever, but at the end of the day, I've just got myself to look in the mirror for that, and that's why I don't do that. I know I've nothing against people that take subsidies. It's completely your own decision. That's just the way I work it. Um, John was asking there, do I still keep bees? What's your experience been with keeping bees and how it compares with enterprises? Um, Okay, again, I'm just talking about my experience here, and I'll say like stuff like, you can't do that, whatever. I'm talking generically in that everything's possible. But for me, like keeping bees commercially is like it's like anything on the farms. You want to be commercial, like if you want to be a commercial beekeeper, you need to be keeping like 100+ hives. Um, and for me, it's risky because generally with like a net layer enterprise, I can sit down, and if I'm using a hybrid pullet, like a Loman Brown, I know exactly how many eggs that bird's going to lay in the year. I know exactly how much it's going to eat. So I can sit down and predict very accurately what the turnover of that enterprise is going to be, what the cost is, and what the profit can be. And based that I can go out and sell all those produce, then I know where I stand very clearly. With honey production, I find it's a lot more difficult. There's a lot more variables. You're relying on the weather, first of all, to be in good weather, that the flowers, that all the plants will flower, that the weather's favorable, that the bees can go and collect that nectar, and then that the bees are in strong and good health to turn that nectar into honey. There's a lot of variables there for me to be relying on honey production. And generally, talking to some old beekeepers, they generally say it kind of works in about 5-year cycles where you'll have one really bad year, you'll have one really good year, and then you'll have a kind of build up and slow down in the middle. And for me, I don't want to be like, I make my living as a farmer here. I don't want to be picking enterprises that hopefully it'll be all right. I can't really afford that. I got bills to pay, I got to keep shelter over my head. So I want to back enterprises that I know are going to come through. So that's why I don't look at bees as a commercial enterprise, not here in Ireland, particularly, well, not here in my context in Ireland, because I'm on the west coast, northwest coast, right in the Atlantic, get almost 6 foot of rain per annum. Like the difference in, I follow Facebook groups for beekeeping, and I would say there's about 3 weeks in difference from the east coast to the west coast in trees flowering. So that means if I was a beekeeper on the east coast, I would have 6 weeks more probably production than I have over here, because I would get 3 weeks at the start and 3 weeks at the end. So that alone for me makes a big difference. So for me, beekeeping wouldn't become, it's really like a sideline enterprise. I do it more for the ecological and the social benefit, and truly I do it to make my own sugar source, and I do extra then that I can sell, but it's a hobby really. And that's not to say you could turn it into an enterprise, but for me it'd be just too risky to turn into an enterprise. Hope that kind of gives you a go on it, but it doesn't mean it's out. You could definitely go and do it if you wanted. But some people might not care about that level of risk and be like, it's totally fine. I definitely think you could make it work. Right. Next question. Any tips for selling produce? Do you do markets, mail order, etc., direct sell via social media channel? I mean, there's no one way to skin a cat, I suppose, is the answer to that, and it depends. my best tip there is with any business, no matter what you're doing or what it is you're selling, word of mouth is still going to be your best sales model or whatever. Because if you produce a really good quality product, it will sell itself eventually. It will organically go and sell itself, because if it's really good, happy customers will go and get you more customers. And equally on that, if your quality or produce isn't there, a disgruntled customer, I suppose, look at it this way: a happy customer will go and tell one person about you, a disgruntled customer will go and tell everybody about you. So, but I find, um, being transparent. I use social media a lot at the start. Being transparent, telling people exactly what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, why I'm doing it, and being honest. And a lot of people get that. They want that. They want the human factor. You can't really go into a shop and get a. You're looking at labels. A lot of them, as we know now, like, take honey is a good example. There, we were talking about honey. It'll be local honey, and then on the back it'll read a blend of EU and non-EU honey. That's more than likely adulterated um, corn syrup from China. So people really appreciate that, that personal connection to a farmer, I feel. And they're willing to pay a bit of a premium for that. I don't do markets, never done markets, because it's a lot of sitting around, in my opinion. And particularly at the start, I was incredibly busy. I was running a lot of enterprises on the farm. So I was pre-selling a lot of stuff through social media and then doing drop-offs. And also the regulations was kind of tying me up a wee bit on my egg sales in markets, because technically I can't sell at markets. So I was avoiding them for that too. So there's a few there. But yeah, and again, I just use social media because it's relative, it's cheap, it's fast, it's convenient for me. And it basically means I can get, I can bring loads of people onto my farm, and they can still sit in their sitting room or wherever they're at work, and they're there. So that would be my advice on that. Just want to check in and see some last appreciation your way off. Sure. Yeah, thanks for your message there, Willem. I suppose a lot of what I'm doing, like my work on YouTube, like I monetize. I don't make any money off YouTube. You need to be getting hundreds of thousands of views to be monetizing YouTube and making any money at it. I suppose I do this, uh, yeah, to help people out. And I suppose I'm trying to be as honest or realistic about the things, because there's lots of good YouTube channels out there that are showing you a lot of the good things. And I remember before I started farming, I was watching a lot of them, and homesteading channels, and this kind of, you get this idealistic mindset, and it is really nice, having really, having a nice farm, but it's a ton of hard work and stuff goes wrong all the time too. So I try to be as realistic as possible. But I don't want I don't want to just put up. I would love to just put up all the negative stuff that are problems, to show people all them, but then everybody would get disheartened with it. So I try to kind of find a nice balance of showing you the nice things, but also being realistic about the things, the problems that they're in farming and the hard work it is. Um, so I try to be as fair as possible in my perception of that. I know sometimes I'll be, shying away from stuff that's maybe problematic or difficult, and other times I'll be maybe showing too much problems. But I try my best. Um, Clarkson Farm showed an Eggmobile shed, I think was the brand. Yeah, they're getting, there's a few companies now really jumping on this mobile uh, um, Eggmobile setup, and it's purely because I think the price of synthetic fertilizer has gone through the roof. So they're thinking, this pastured layer operation is a way of maybe increasing fertility in land, with a less expensive input, which it is in a way, and hopefully it'll be good, because and the idea is selling now, these mobile houses they're selling are quite expensive. Most of the ones for like 200 laying hens from an organic certified design is like 40,000 euros, and the bigger ones go up to maybe 60,000 euros. They're designed to be sold to bigger farms, big dairy farms, bigger tillage farms, to try and cut out some of their nutrient input bill. That's my take on it, and I'm kind of reading between the lines. So there's companies out there designing them, but I think as default that'll be really good for smaller producers like me, because eventually the regulation will be kind of reinterpreted to encompass this more mobile system. So in the longer term, I think that'll be a really good thing. So the price of synthetic fertilizer going up by default is a good thing. Can you tell us a bit more about the slaughterhouse, about the legal perspectives? I don't have a slaughterhouse on the farm. I was going to put in a poultry slaughterhouse, but with the price of grain going up where it is, it doesn't make that much sense for me to do broilers anymore, because just people in Ireland don't value chicken as much as maybe, say, in Central Europe. You can't really get organic chicken like readily available in the supermarkets here, like other countries, maybe Scandinavian countries. I know you can buy organic chicken in the shop and it's priced at organic prices. So people are comparing chicken to the standard. You can buy a chicken in the shop here for like €3-4. So I moved away from doing broilers when the price of grain started to really increase. So I also moved away from wanting to build a slaughtery. It's not that bad. I know people, I have a couple of friends that have certified slaughteries. You got to meet certain standards. I worked out the cost for me to build a slaughtery was about €20,000. There is a bit of an upfront cost there. Like, you do need good equipment, you need stainless steel, you need a good chiller. Where the animals are killed needs to be separate. Where the animals are kept alive needs to be separate to where the animals are killed, needs to be separate to where the animals are eviscerated, and then chilled. So you just need good process, and it's not ridiculously difficult to do. Just requires a bit of investment. The main question I'd be asking yourself there about slaughtering is, how do you set it up? Are you going to be slaughtering on your own? Do you have access to 4 other people to help you slaughter? Because how you would set up a slaughtery for one person versus how you would set up a slaughtery for multiple people running it would be very different setups and would cost different. So I'll be thinking about that there. How did you first take the plunge and go for it? So the question here is, how did you first take the plunge and go for it? Self-employed, and can get so far, but it's part-time basis. We have mortgage, 2 kids. It's a big step to stop the monthly income protection. I suppose it was a big plunge for me because 2018 I was getting serious about this, but I really didn't know there wasn't that many people around doing this. There was probably a few people down the south of the country, but not really in a regenerative farm. There were just small organic farms selling direct. So I didn't really know if this thing was going to take off. So I took a big risk. And basically what I done is I saved up a nest egg where I was willing to invest €10,000 in 1 year into it. And I'd saved up enough money to allow me that grace. Now, I was very fortunate, didn't have a mortgage, no kids depending on me, so I was willing to do that. But now remember, I didn't know if this would work. Different story now. I know it works. There's people all around Ireland now running similar models to this, and there's people buying the food. At the time, I was like, I'm up here in Donegal. We're one of the social economic lowest counties in Ireland, and here's me trying to sell a premium product. I didn't think it would work, or I didn't know if it would work. So the first year, I saved up a nest egg, and Joe Salatin, anyone that follows him, he would advise something similar. If you can save up the nest egg so that you can give it a good shake of the stick. And worst case scenario, well, you just burnt through your nest egg and it didn't work, and off you go with whatever else you're going to do in life. And I don't believe in finance, so it's a big plunge. Yes, for sure, it's a big plunge, but you got to commit to it. I suppose the big thing is there's a big difference between homestead and hobby scaling and commercial production, and it's a hard leap to take. And I can understand I can think back and I can understand the fears and the reservations. I mean, it comes back to how everything my farm is mainly based. And I don't talk about it too much on YouTube, but it's the success of my farm is my holistic context. The whole process lined out by Alan Savory is most known for his work in reverting desertification and mob grazing or moving animals every day, but that's not his greatest work at all, in my opinion. His greatest work is his holistic decision-making framework, and that whole process you go through to figure out what the hell it is you want to get out of life. Um, that for me made me really understand what it is I want to get out of life. It made it very clear to me. Before, when I was at that stage in my life, I was very much focused on monetary. Society wanted me to think money is my limiting factor in life, because everything I'm bombarded, from we get out of bed, or we're psychoanalyzed if we're on the internet. Advertisements are coming from the radio, whomever, spend this, we need you get finance on that. And so I thought for a long time, money is my limiting factor. I need to go out and make more money. And going through Alan Savory's holistic management process, I realized I do have a limiting factor in life, but it is not money. My limiting factor in life is time. And it was that realization that I completely kind of changed my whole outlook in life, and my decision making is, I know what's important to me now and what will bring happiness to me, and I make decisions based on that. And for my farm here, our holistic context is to be socially, um, ecologically, and economically beneficial. So if I have to make a decision, I ask myself, is it going to, bring me closer to those three goals or bring me further away? And if it brings me closer, then I do it. And if it's bringing me further away, then I say no. And it's that simple. Um, but it is, the long and the short of it is you won't know until you go at it. So you can do the best planning you can, and at some point you have to commit to it and go. Um, Interesting. Doing broilers this year. We buy our feed too, I thought. Just a question there on broilers. One other thing, like broilers aren't that suited to the Irish, pastured broilers aren't that suited to the Irish context. Now, it does depend where you are in Ireland, but again, for me here on the northwest coast, like cold and wet is a broiler's absolute nightmare. So for me, I soon realized when I initially started doing broilers, I was trying to do like, 6 production batches starting in like April through to the end of September. And I was just asking for trouble, because, April, our last frost date is still the 14th of April, historically. There was one year we had frost on the 14th of May. It's still wet as hell. And you're trying to put these birds out in pasture where there might be water flooding in underneath them. Like I was off bloody a rocker. So the more I developed my broiler operation, the more I realized I need to do more birds in smaller and less number of batches, and really aim for the good summer months. And so now I only really plan to do broilers. Even if I'm doing broilers for ourselves, we still eat chicken ourselves. I do broilers for ourselves, for my family, and I would aim to do them for like June, July, August, no later, because you're dealing. The only way you can make any money I can see is either with like Ross and maybe Hubbard breeds, these real hybrid breeds, and they are very, very finicky. You need to be on point with them. They're like race cars, you need to be getting everything right for them. So I would be keeping. It was just the mortality will go way up if you get bad weather early on, and later on you're trying to get them out in the field. It's no fun. So that's why I was also, and like I want to move away from pastured everything, because I don't grow grain here. And so relying on buying in grain as a commodity isn't a great business plan, if you look at it with a child's logic for me. So that's why I'm pushing developing things like the goats, agri-tourism, other aspects where I'm complete control of the input cost. That's the key for me, for like having the farm long into the future. Um, and bird flu is a big issue too. That's going to be more and more of an issue, I think, going forward, because of their, taking great approach to it. It's just house the birds for, more and more of what probably caused the problem in the first place. Uh, yeah, there's someone there. Yeah, McLean Family Bees, just kind of confirming the extent of how here in Donegal, and it's kind of envious maybe for us on the west coast, when you can see people heading out to gather like oil rapeseed and stuff like that. Like we don't have well, particularly around here where I am, like there's no big fields of oil rapeseed or any of that stuff to be harvesting. So that's why I say bees aren't really a runner for me. But like you could look at your location and it could be a completely different ball game. So it's always the answer to nearly every question you ask me will probably be it depends. Um, and so yeah, bees, I see them as a really good side enterprise that you could make some extra holiday money or whatever it is you're doing, they'd definitely be there. You could expand it into beekeeping is getting a lot more common as a hobby, and you could sell nucleus, what you would call a nucleus of bees, so a small box of bees that you would sell for someone to start with. But then you need to be a really good like breeder, in my opinion, because you need to. The bees I generally keep are a bit crazy. I say that because I select. I don't feed my bees fondant. I don't use any herbicides or pesticides for them. If they die, they die. And so therefore, I select for bees that can really thrive, and they generally are a bit more, what people would say, aggressive. Now, what that means is really is when I'm in and rip the roof off their house, they're not as docile and friendly as what a lot of bees would be, what people would like. But I like that because I don't have mite issues. I don't need to feed them. They're really good honey harvesters or honey producers, and I can leave it with them. They get themselves through the winter, and I'm breeding. I'm selecting hardy bees, but it means they're not that docile to work with, and I'm okay with that because they're off on their own. It's only me that goes in. I put on my bee suit, and everything's fine. So I wouldn't sell these bees to anybody because they'd be a nightmare for a beginner to work with. But you could develop a business whereby you develop really nice bees that are easy for beginners to work with, and you could sell them. There's like a nook of bees now. I think could be like somewhere in the region like €250. So you could have a nice little build up a nice reputation for yourself and have a nice bit of a business going that way. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. The other thing you can look at is like there's not just honey production isn't the only output of bees. You've got wax. So there's like multiple. You can make cosmetic products with the wax. You can make aesthetic products, candles. Then like I've often thought there's different like we're in Europe here, you mightn't get away with it, but like there's I can't remember. I was reading an article where you can get stung by bees as like a therapy. All this other mad stuff. So it's you're only limited by your imagination, I suppose. Uh, you commenting there about the bees. Yeah, now, like most people I find, because a lot of people who don't know that much about bees is they have a bad perception of them, but generally it's the wasp that people have a bad perception with. The honeybee actually has a barb on their stinger, so when they sting you and they're going to pull out their stinger gets left behind, and generally a bit of their abdomen comes out with that, and they'll fly off and die. So they're only going to sting you as a last resort. Generally, if you're coming in on their hive or and whereas a yellow jacket or a wasp, they've got a straight stinger and they can sting you as many times as they want. So they've generally got the bad rap, but people kind of associate the honeybee and them in the one category. So yeah, the little honeybee never really hurts anybody. He just gets working tirelessly till they die. But interesting story. The reason why one of the main pillars of my context in the farm is to be socially beneficial. That's inspired by the bees. Honeybees are thought to be 80 to 100 million years old, maybe. That's a long, long time to figure stuff out. And in the summertime, you get a full hive in the summertime with maybe 2, 3, 4 supers on it. Could be anything up to 100,000 bees in that hive. But every single one of them is working for the good of the whole. There's not one bee in there out for themselves. They're all working together. And I truly believe that's how they got to be 80 to 100 million years old. And so that's why I feel it's really important for me in the farm to be integrated socially. And that's why I do stuff like this, in a farming social community, to be giving back, to be producing quality food for the community. Because if I go off and try and be, kind of like how capitalism kind of is, go off and be on my own and do the best for me, I think if I try and do that, at some point I'll run out of road. But only if we work as a group like the bees, if we work as a local community, as a nation, as a global community, can we go on indefinitely. So yeah, the little honeybee's powerful. Geese, can they be grass fed? I don't know enough. I mean, probably yes, but can you do it economically would be my question there. I've done a few geese in the past, but not enough to test the data enough, and I've fed them on grain. They can obviously survive on grass. How long it would take to get them to a weight that you could sell them? You could definitely sell geese at Christmas. There's always a market there. So PJ, I definitely think there's mileage in it. What the profitability of it is, I don't know. Sounds like your rank layers and turkeys pretty high as enterprises, even with the rising cost of grain. How late in the year could you keep them in pasture in Ireland? I mean, I rank them high because when I look at my holistic context, um, are they good for the environment? Well, they do an awesome job at stirring up the soil, flattening down any stagnant grasses. They really help the pastures. Socially, you can't get eggs or turkeys anywhere else around here like them. 100% clean. So they're really good socially and economically. I make money doing it. Now, as the price of grain increases, the economics of them go down and down. So when I started this, layer grain was 500 euros a ton. I was making really good money. It's 1,000 euros a ton now. So to some point, they won't be economical anymore, and I'll stop doing them if that's the case and find something else that meets my context. So that's why they're good for me. If they'd be good for you or not would depend on your context, would be my answer to that. How long? Your question there was how late in the year could you keep them out in pasture? And it's like, again, depends on the year, depends on your ground, depends on how many birds you have on it. As a rule of thumb, I'd say somewhere between, on a really bad year, the beginning of October. Now, bearing in mind, I'm very coastal and get a lot of precipitation here. If you're further inland, further south, you might get away longer. But sometime in October, between October and November, I'd say you definitely have to put them in. Sorry, guys. The reason being, for people that mightn't know, like poultry, they can move a lot of ground. All they do all day long is right foot, left foot, left foot. And although in the summertime they can be really beneficial to your pasture and really help, it can be equally opposite the problem in the wintertime, because our issue here in Ireland is our pastures get waterlogged. And then they will do detrimental effect to it, where they will denude it. They'll bring the mud up over the grass, and what they'll do is they'll really delay your spring growth. So you will get to a point where you need to get them off your pasture, unless you have some sort of ground, like you're on like a quarry base, or you're on like really free draining soil. But I know a lot of people around the island that are doing this, and they get to a point at some point where the birds have to come off the pasture. They'll do more damage than good. So I can't really answer definite there, but I would say be planning. If you wanted to plan worst case, I'd say sometime in October. And if it was a really good year, you might get on later and later and later. I have one year got into December, but it was really dry winter. um, Can you explain your thinking behind the goat enterprise compared to beef or dairy enterprise? Yeah, the reason for goat, beef, dairy just doesn't fit me. My context, my ground, like I could not have cattle outside. Same reason we were talking about the layers. My ground gets waterlogged sometime in October or November. And if I had cows outside and that, they just plug everything. And again, spring growth's going to be completely delayed. So putting cows in a house is not a smart idea, in my opinion. A cow, nowhere in nature do we see a group of, deer. We've got wild deer here. Where's a group of deer come together and said, hey, it'd be a good idea if we build a roof and we hang out under it for 6 months. Cows have not evolved physically or psychologically to be in that environment. And when you put an animal in an environment that's not evolved to be in, you're going to get unintended consequences. And that's why we get, animals get sick, then they need medication, vaccination. You get a manure problem you got to deal with. So I don't to me, all I see is problems if I go down that road. So it just doesn't work for me, because I can't keep the cows outside. Now, if I get a piece of ground where I can overwinter the cows outside, then it's a different ballgame. But for me, I can't do that. So that's why I look at goats. I could overwinter goats outside, much lighter animal, much easier to manage on the pasture without doing detrimental effect to the pasture. So that's why I'm looking at goats more so than cows. But again, that's purely down to my context. Any other questions there, guys? Fire them in. I think I'm getting through them all. I think the geese is a really good question. I do think there's mileage in that, because geese, as many as you probably know, they can survive on grass compared to, say, layers or broilers. And just maybe that reminded me another question I was asked during the week. There is this perception that pastured layers, because you've put them out in pasture, you wouldn't have to feed them as much as if they were housed. like for the most part, that's kind of an urban myth, really, because they're omnivores, not herbivores. They can't really get that much usable protein from grasses or insects, really. These hybrid layers are producing a lot. They're producing like 6 eggs a week. It's a lot of work, and so they need that energy put into them. So like my layers, and they're housed in the wintertime, they're out in pasture in the summertime, they still get the same feed. So theoretically, I'd say if that was true, they wouldn't need as much feed in the summer, but that's not the case. So but the geese can, so there would be definitely mileage there. uh, Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, can't believe that we've hit 2000. I mean, I just come on here and ramble on and try to tell people where I messed up and where not to mess up. But the big thing I can say is, like, everything is about your context. What it is you want to get out of life, what it is suits your farm, how you want to live, what your financial situation is. And the best thing you can do is well, if you make a decision based on those things, that's going to be the best decision no matter what it is. If you try and copy me and what I'm doing, it's probably not going to work out for you. Like I always say to people, they ask me, how do you do this, or why do you, what can I do there? Like how I set my farm up here, if I was to set it up 20 miles down the road, I would probably do stuff different because things would be slightly different down there. My context would be slightly different. So I only do everything I really do because it fits right here, if that makes any sense. Do you worm your sheep or any of your livestock with any very wet pastures? No, I don't use any. I don't put it like I eat my animals. I've got little nieces and nephews, little baby kids. They eat the animals. I refuse to put anything in those animals, any sort of concoction. So what do? I do. Well, one, I our animals are always moving. Holistic. That's probably the biggest benefit. You're generally moving away from problems. I don't house. The only thing that really gets housed is the layers because of the bird flu ban. Um, and they're really young. I only keep them for 1 year, so they're still really young, so they're fit and healthy. Generally, animals get sick, or older animals. So we tend to. Now I'm talking about kind of my childhood, and because I come from conventional hill sheep farming, and we tend to, well, what we do in conventional agriculture is we try to kill things that want to live and try to keep things alive that want to die. And we've taken animals out of their natural habitat now. So, we've sheep don't have predators anymore. Cows don't have predators. Predators are nature's way of keeping things in balance. So what do the predators normally do? They go after the sick and the old. And so therefore they keep the herd or the flock, generally the genetics, young and healthy. And so if you remove the predator, and you're basically, the farmer has to either replace the predator, and if he doesn't, then your flock's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker, because nobody's doing that natural cycle of selecting the best, weeding out. It was something when I seen them doing in New Zealand first, was, any animal that was causing problems was getting culled, and that made sense to me. They were being the predator. When I was growing up as a kid, I didn't see too much of that. We try to give animals crutches as opposed to say, shit, we need to get rid of that animal. Because very often, as you start to study it more, the offspring of that animal will carry maybe those recessive, those genes. Let them be dominant or recessive, and maybe they mightn't show the trait, but then the son or daughter of that animal might have it as a dominant gene, and then they show it again. So I suppose I keep a lot of young animals, but I am also like, if an animal's a problem on the farm, we eat it, because I don't want to breed problems. That would be my answer to that. I do use some homemade remedies. Like I've started into Korean natural farming, so I use stuff like OHN, so Oriental herb nutrient. I use apple cider vinegar, and I just put a tiny drop into their water. But I would attribute the most thing is keeping animals in an environment they've evolved to be in, culling any problematic animals, and always move away from the problems. That's the key. Have the animals moving every day. That's the best thing I can put it down to. There's nature's complex. There's definitely way more going on that I don't know about. Do you have any educational events planned this year? Yes, they're on our website. So actually, let me think. I think we've got 5 or 6 trainings. And for a lot of you guys, if you are in Ireland here, you can sign up through Knots, who have a really good subsidy fee. I'm really trying to get I've really got my trainings dialed in now. I've got them down to 1 day. So, you can come up in the morning. I am just going to offload a ton of information on you. You're going to see it. You can get to try it if you want, and then off you go. And you can that evening, and then you can digest it and ruminate it and think about it for a while. And I'm also been able to do it incredibly cheap because my goal isn't really to make any real money out of the education. I have to value my time, and then through Knots, they're thankfully we're working with Knots this year again, and they're subsidizing it again. So if you go on the Knots website, you'll see our trainings advertised there. You can sign up through them. I don't think they have them all up there yet. You can look on my website, www.heatherhillfarm.ie, and see what we're doing. But we're going to be doing, we've got 2 pastured layers days, so the 2 separate days. You can come if you can't make one. I've put on a second one because in the past I was doing it over 2 days, once in the summer, and it didn't, the timing didn't work for people. So I've got it condensed to 1 day, just pastured layers, 2 different options to choose from. Then we've got pastured turkeys, and what's our other trainings? We've got I'm doing a new one this year, which I'm really excited about, because I feel like I've kind of got enough years behind now to kind of make a picture of it, how to start a farm from scratch. And that's for people who are really looking to get into farming, and that's really going to look at taking the money you have, what you should invest it in, how I've made it work, and kind of different things I've seen too. I have lots of friends all over Europe now that are doing really cool things. So different stuff I've seen. I think that's going to be a really fun training. I've got a direct marketing training, so how to build a customer base. And then again, our pastured layers and pastured turkey training days, that starts off, we go through all the animal husbandry, the infrastructure, the design, the regulations. Then we look at all the spreadsheets, all the costs, how to work out the costs, how to work the profitability. We go through all that stuff, and it's generally, if we get time at the end of the day too, we'll take some of the participants that might have already started or planning to start, and we kind of work out their business plan, what it would look like. So it's a really packed full of information, but it's my goal for those trainings is to give people the confidence to leave, knowing that they can go and do it. That's a big thing for me, because when I was starting this, there was nowhere I could really go to get that confidence to go at it. And that's what I try to create an environment where people come, they get all the information they need, but they also get that confidence to go off and start their own really cool enterprises. Hi, Cahill. I'm thinking of getting a few pigs for meat. How hard is it to get a herd number for pigs? Again, this is the same thing with regulations and herd numbers and that. It's not difficult. But it can be more difficult. Depends who your regional inspector is. Some inspectors are really good. Some inspectors are really stiflers. I know people that get herd numbers no problem at all. I know people that have real problems getting herd numbers. So I can't answer that, but generally with pigs, with any animal, you need to show that you've got a good perimeter fence so the animal isn't going to get away. You need to show that you're going to have some. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head. For free range pigs, you don't require that much. You would need to show that you've got some sort of area, indoor area, a shed, or some sort of cover. So if you had a sick animal, you could bring it in and tend to it inside. But very basic stuff. Shouldn't be that difficult. Like particularly if you're only going for a couple for a homestead, they won't be. They'll come out and look, and they should be pretty reasonable. You're not trying to set up a 10,000 fattener house, so shouldn't be too bad. The best thing to do is there's a form online. If you look online, the government changed their website now. It's a lot harder to find stuff, but there should be a pig herd number application form. You fill that in, send it into your regional veterinary office. Then they'll send a vet out to inspect it, and then if they're happy, or they might recommend, they'll come out and look at it, and they'll recommend if they want to see changes, and then you'll get your pig herd number then. Hi James, how are you? Huge soap for Yeah, so James is talking about how there's huge scope for change for integrating regenerative farming into current conventional farming, and the hardest thing is unlearning what you've learned. It definitely is. Um, I suppose for me, the biggest shift was actually understanding that the soil was a living, breathing thing, and you know, uh, growing up farming, all we were ever focused on was the animals, and then you take that a step further and you focus on the grasses, but ultimately you truly understand it's the soil that drives everything. And for me, that was the biggest. Once I made that shift in my mind about that, everything else kind of cascaded along with it. I suppose is my thoughts on that. Uh, PJ's asking, how is your approach going down with conventional guys in your backyard? Well, sadly, there's a couple of things here. Generally, I mean, my dad's maybe the best example because he's just a hobby conventional farmer. There's very few, and I'm in southwest Donegal, but there's very few young full-time farmers around here anymore. Anyone that's full-time farming are like not too far off retiring. I'm talking generally here now. You will find completely exceptions to the case, um, but it's just been too difficult to make a living. You know, a young person couldn't make a living off farming and raise a family on land in this part of Ireland anyway, and here I am doing it. So a lot of people respect that, and also it was a lot harder at the start. I started this 5 years ago, and I was telling people fertilizer prices are going to double overnight, and they laughed at me. And I was telling them subsidies are going to stop one day, and they laugh at me. And but now that fertilizer prices have doubled, a lot of the farmers around here, like they remember, a lot of them are older. They remember how they farmed 50 years ago, and they see that that's how I'm farming. Like I didn't invent any new thing. Like I'm farming how people farmed 50, 100 years ago, and they've seen that, and they grew up as children. A lot, I think of my dad, and a lot of those people grew up as children of that. So they actually start now. They didn't appreciate it, I think, because it was bloody hard work, and they thought it was probably stupid. But now with the price of oil, the price of synthetic inputs and grains going through the roof, it makes total sense now. It probably didn't make sense to them 5 years ago, which was fine. It didn't make sense. I was thinking outside the box. So I think they're coming around to it, but with the total increase, and they understand that they know themselves there's no money in farming. But I mean that's a totally stupid statement, because like I like to say to people, food is worth, economy of food in Ireland is worth billions of euros. There's billions of euros spent in food in Ireland every year. I would imagine it'd be close to a billion anyway. I would think. I don't know what the exact number is. So to say there's no money in farming, which is food production, is absolute nonsense. Just the sad fact is the farmers don't see very much of the money. And my model that I try to do is trying to capture that money. So you have very short, uh, uh, sales line. There's you and the customer, so it's really good value for the customer and good value for the farmer. And then you try to be, not as reliant on external inputs. And I mean, it makes sense. Like a child can sit back, and a child's logic would say, that's a kind of a sensible business approach. So it's difficult to argue with it, and particularly now when the price of synthetics and that have gone up. And if the subsidy stopped tomorrow, there would be no arguing with it. It's the only way to go forward. And I know some people believe that not to be happening. I truly believe not tomorrow, but not too many years in the future. I do think the subsidies will stop, and unfortunately, a lot of farms will disappear overnight. I hope it doesn't be the case, and there's an alternative. But I don't want to be pessimistic either. At least I know there's a way we can keep going for sure. I think I've got most of the questions there. I think we're coming up on time, and I'm going to have to cut it short here. I'm getting hoarse speaking early. That's one thing that maybe I normally, when I'm doing tours in the farm, I'm talking all the time, and I can do it. But over the winter, when things are a lot quieter, I'm not talking as much, and my voice starts to get strained. But when I was teaching, you're any of you teachers out there, see James and some of them, you still know you can talk all day, no problem, because your voice is used to it. I'm not used to that anymore. My voice is starting to get strained. I think I've answered any other questions there. Fire them up quick and I'll get them. But other than that, thanks so much for tuning in. Anyone that bothered to tune in there. Hope you have a good week going forward. And I've got a few more jobs. I'm still kind of in winter cleanup mode in the farm, getting odd jobs done that I've been putting off for probably 3 years. It's really nice to be getting around, getting things the way I want them. I was really focused on the kind of economics and the output and keep, really pushing the farm hard. And it's nice to be taking a wee bit of a break and just getting things the way I want them around the place. But I'm fortunate. I'm in a position, I'm not, I don't need to have to go out and make all the money to that. I'm fortunate that I can take a wee breather and get things the way I want them. So I think that's it. I don't see any new questions coming in there. I think I'm going to wrap it up. And yeah, best of luck to all you guys out there with the season coming up. I hope it's a really good year weather-wise, and we get, it's not going to be, I can actually feel the days are getting, the mornings are getting brighter much earlier. The evenings are starting to get a good stretch in them, and I can start to, in my mind's eye, I can see the summer evenings again, and I'm really looking forward to that. All right, guys, thanks so much and take care.